Welcome, everybody. Welcome to RISE, the 2020 Women's Conference, San Mateo County. This is our closing session for this day, and we're privileged and honored to have Congresswoman Jackie Speier with us. And she's always very popular, and she always has great, interesting things to say. So I think we're in for a real treat. I'll just give you a couple of little brief things, and then she'll take it over. She joined the Board of Supervisors of San Mateo County in 1981, and then moved on to the Assembly and the State Senate. And since 2008, she has represented us as our 14th Congressional District Representative. And I think that everybody in San Mateo County is just could be so pleased with what she has done for us and how her office helps us and the work that she has done in Washington. So thank you, Jackie, and welcome to RISE.
Thank you, Carol. And let me take a moment to congratulate you on continuing a very strong tradition in San Mateo County to have the Board of Supervisors, particularly you, take on the responsibility of grooming a whole new generation of young women to, in fact, rise. So it's an extraordinary legacy, and you should be very proud. I also want to congratulate our new women to the Hall of Fame, Judge Beth Freeman, Dr. Belinda Arriaga, Celine Wen, and Sarah Pistorino. Celine and Sarah are young women. They're part of this new generation that is going to rid us of all of the misogynistic laws and practices that go on because they aren't going to take no as an answer. So honored to be with you. Today is Women's Equality Day. It became that day in 1971 when Congresswoman Bella Abzug, who was from New York, kind of a salty woman who used to wear hats, she decided that she was going to pass this resolution. And I just want to read part of it to you. The first line of the resolution read, "The women of the United States have been treated as second-class citizens and have not been entitled to full rights and privileges, public or private, legal or institutional, which are available to male citizens of the United States." Well, to this day, Women's Equality Day allows us not only to reflect on the sanctity of our vote, but also to recognize how much farther we must go to really achieve what we call equality. I want to take you back in time to 1917, when the first pickets took place outside of the White House. And they were women dressed in white, who were picketing the White House and President Woodrow Wilson because they wanted the right to vote. And then on November 14th, 1917, it was called the Night of Terror. There were 33 women that were arrested. They were met at prison by guards with clubs. They were choked, kicked, and one was even stabbed in between the eyes. They were fed rotten food. A couple of them went on a hunger strike, and then they were force-fed with a tube through their noses. But that night of terror has been forgotten by many, but you know what? There's form of terror that women are enduring to this day. In 2020, women are still, I think we would have to say, treated like second-class citizens. If you have any doubts, just look at the sexist and racist coverage of Senator Kamala Harris, our vice presidential candidate on the Democratic side. Or consider the fact that women still lose on average of $10,000 each year in what's called the gender wage gap. And Black women don't receive equality in terms of making up for the money made by a man the year before until August of the following year. We still experience pregnancy discrimination. We're denied reasonable accommodations for pregnancy and forced out of the workforce. Just recently, the Postmaster General was queried about this by one of my colleagues when he was the CEO of a company called XPO Logistics. It's actually a contractor with the Postal Service. He still has stock in that company, which creates a gross conflict of interest. But as CEO of this business, 6 warehouse employees were denied breaks during work shifts as pregnant women. And these 6 women suffered miscarriages after lifting heavy boxes. One woman actually died of cardiac arrest after being denied a break. So a lot of things haven't changed, even though we have put laws on the books that you would presume have fixed them. And that's why, frankly, we need the Equal Rights Amendment, and why I'm proud to be the author of the resolution that would strike the artificial deadline that was put in that 1972 resolution. And now we do have 38 states that have passed it. And if we can get it passed out of the Senate, we will have the Equal Rights Amendment. Those 24 words that basically just put us in the Constitution. It's startling to realize that so many other countries around the world have the equal rights provision in their constitutions, but the United States of America does not. But beyond all of that, we still are behind the 8 ball as an industrialized nation. We're the only one that doesn't guarantee family and medical leave. And as a result, 1 in 4 women today return to work within 2 weeks of their delivering their babies. We have no universal child care. And oftentimes child care workers are just basically at the poverty level in terms of wages. And one thing has become really clear in this COVID world, and that is there is no recovery without childcare. And we have to recognize that universal childcare is the only way that we are going to move forward and have this economy humming again. So I'm hopeful that we're going to do more than just increasing childcare tax credits. We need universal childcare that's provided to every family in America, and a pre-K component that guarantees every child that step up that certainly Supervisor Groom has been working so hard on here in San Mateo County. If we don't act to rescue the childcare industry, we are at risk of losing, get this, 1/2 of the childcare slots in America. So many of these childcare facilities just will not reopen again. So our work is still in front of us. The Me Too movement was a sobering reminder that sexual and domestic violence continues to run rampant. I chaired an effort in Congress to rid us of our Me Too movement in Congress, and we had a number of members who were either kicked out or resigned as a result of their behavior. And then we've had tragic stories like that of Vanessa Guillen, a young specialist in the U.S. Army who was murdered just in April. Her remains weren't found until the end of June, and she had been sexually harassed. So we have another effort underway in Congress, in the committee that I chair, to deal with sexual assault in the military. And we have the likes of Betsy DeVos, who wants to turn back the clock so that every sexual harasser and sexual assaulter in college can get away with it. Again, we're not going to allow that to happen. So, excuse me, I've got a little frog in my throat. One thing we do know, that women make up the backbone of this country. We are far and away the highest number of voters. Women made the difference in the 2018 election, and we believe they're going to make the difference in the 2020 election as well. Black women, suburban women, women of color, Latino women fighting to keep their families together. This is a time for women in America to recognize that we must step up. We have a country to save. And if we don't vote, and we don't make sure our family members vote, we risk losing this incredible democracy that has survived for 240 years. And make no mistake about it, we assume that this democracy will be here forever. Most democracies in history fail. So this is a real test of whether we value this as important as it is. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Carol, and we can continue with the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Tanya, do you have questions that you want to feed to us, or are you giving them to me?
Yes, well, I can ask both of you. I'm going to ask our general attendees to submit any questions in the Q&A box. There was one already, I think, submitted in chat, and I believe it's specific to San Mateo County, but we can talk about the county in the Bay Area. What is the status of San Mateo County in providing universal childcare? And that is from Ellen Tafine.
I can start. We are making a little bit of headway through our Big Lift program, which is the third grade reading initiative. In 7 school districts, we now have 2 years of high quality preschool for all children. And we hope over the years, as we expand the Big Lift program, which we will expand our more childcare program. We also just set aside $3 million of CARES Federal Act money, Congresswoman Speier, for a pool for childcare providers to request funds to expand or to add or to improve their facilities. So we're working hard at it. It's not 100% yet, but we are working.
Okay, we have another question from Teresa Robb. How can we best help support women to register and vote, especially in other states?
You know, we're making it a whole lot easier across the country to register to vote. And in over 40 states now, you're going to be able to vote absentee. So the most important message you can convey to your family and friends around the country is register. You can do it online and vote early. It's going to be critical this year to vote early. As soon as you get your ballot, I would vote, and if you can put it in the mail right away, all the better. If you put it in the mail after October 22nd, it could get stuck. We had over 65,000 ballots in primaries across the country that weren't counted due to no reason associated with the voter. They were delayed in the mail. So these were actual ballots that were mailed in a timely fashion. They just never got to their destination in a timely fashion, and therefore were not voted. In California, we have to have them postmarked on election day, but that really requires that you take it down and get it postmarked, as opposed to putting it in a mailbox.
Okay.
Can I, excuse me, can I tell a great story about California and voting, since Equality Day is
Yes,
today?
please.
Please do.
Yes.
I want to tell you about the first woman who voted in California. Her name was Charlotte Parkhurst, but she wasn't known as Charlotte. She was known as One-Eyed Charlie, and his name was Charlie Parkhurst. He was abandoned as a small child on the East Coast, eventually found his way to California, became a stagecoach driver. And One-Eyed Charlie was known throughout the region as being really good at what he did. And he voted in 1868. And then when he died in 1879, and they're preparing him for his funeral, they found out that Charlie was really not Charlie, but Charlotte. And Charlotte Parkhurst is buried in Pioneer Cemetery in Watsonville.
Wow.
Isn't that a great story? And a true one.
That's a great story.
Great story.
Love that. So let's see. What a great story. We have now, of course, many questions flowing in. Our next question is, what are your views on offering free financial counseling and education to the public?
Well, financial literacy is a component now in many educational settings. Um, it's needed desperately because there are lots of charlatans out there that want to sell you any number of ways to get rich quick, solve your mortgage dilemmas, give you a lower interest rate that oftentimes are not what they are promoted as. So we have consumer protection laws, we have county councils and local DAs that can help case by case, but I think financial literacy is really important. It starts at home. You know, I encourage all of our audience participants to look at your own families and look at opportunities to kind of teach that. I'm still teaching my 26 and 32-year-old how they need to spend their monies, and it's not on Starbucks every day. No offense to Starbucks, but work their coffee at home.
Great. I love that. Thank you. We have a great question from Pamela Jones, and that is, how do we engage city councils to actively support women's issues and racial equity?
What do you think, Carol? Do you have some thoughts?
I think the first thing you have to do is we're going to their meetings and be a regular attendee and spend some time speaking with them individually. But long before I ran for the city council, I used to go to the city of San Mateo City Council meetings and pay attention to what they were doing. And the more people in those rooms at those meetings, the more effective and better decisions I think are made.
So I would suggest a couple of other things as well. Every city council has, either at the beginning or the end of their meetings, a opportunity for what is called public comment. And I would encourage you to identify an issue and go to the city council and say, you would like to have this actually agendized and be taken up by the city council. And if that doesn't work, I would then go out and petition and get people to sign petitions to do it. I remember when I was first elected to the Board of Supervisors, we didn't have a commission on the status of women. In fact, it had gone down to defeat 2 years before I got there. And I thought to myself, you know, all of these men sitting on this dais have been elected by women who have worked their campaigns. So I got all of the women's organizations in the county together. We came up with a plan. We actually started it with a different name so it wouldn't be offensive. I wouldn't do this today, but I was a little cautious at the age of 30, and I was a member of the board. So first called it the Advisory Council on Women. But we brought it to the board, and I stacked the room with women, most of whom had worked on the campaigns of most of the members, and it passed. So it's just being strategic, and you have more power than you think you have. I think that's a message we want to convey today. You have a lot of power, and you can exercise it, but you have to almost be in people's faces, and that might be uncomfortable for some, but no one's going to tap you on the shoulder and tell you to run for office.
That's right.
You've got to have the fire in your belly and just do it. And don't be reluctant to question the status quo. And that's the only way we ever change things.
Absolutely. And it's been interesting to attend some of your town halls, which we greatly appreciate. There are so many topics that come up, and you listen a lot. With COVID, with racial inequities, with the national election, you know, here with the Commission on the Status of Women, What have you been hearing are the like top 3 issues for women and girls that you think that this commission could start addressing?
Top three. Well, one of the first questions that was just asked was on childcare. Um, you know, we're a microcosm of the country. We can do things in San Mateo County that then can be aha moments across the whole United States. So what if we went to all the corporations and said, all right, we're going to provide universal childcare in San Mateo County. This is what it's going to cost. How much are you willing to put in? We're going to create a tax on a sales tax, a parcel tax, whatever, to get this done. In many respects, I think businesses now appreciate that childcare is a huge component. I was on calls this morning with a couple of large companies in America, some of the largest. They're all providing a form of childcare to their employees right now because they recognize how difficult it is with COVID and schools, some going into session, some not. And so I think childcare would be a really important one. We're working, I think Carol and I are working with a young student who wants to provide menstrual products to all high schools for free. We should have that. I mean, if men had periods, do you think that there would be a charge for tampons and sanitary napkins in bathrooms? Absolutely not. It should be considered like toilet paper. And yet we deal with the trauma associated with it. And young girls in particular are impacted by them, particularly in school. But I think we all have horror stories that we can remember that were embarrassing for us because we started our periods and didn't have the necessary feminine products. I'd also like to talk about the pink tax. It is incomprehensible that we still pay more for the same product. In the pharmacy, online, I've done a whole study on this. I mean, you can buy toys for kids that are identical at big box stores. And if it's pink, it's just going to be more expensive. You can go to the local pharmacy and the pink razors are going to be more expensive than the blue razors, even though they're exactly the same. Deodorant, whatever the issue is, whatever the product is, we have a law in California that says you cannot charge more for a haircut or cleaning for any service based on gender. It has to be based on the amount of time it takes for that particular service. Now that law has been on the books since the 90s because I was the author of it. But the enforcement isn't as it should be. And sometimes I walk down a street and see a sandwich sign that has differentials based on gender, and I want to go in there and argue with the owner, but I just don't have the time. But you should all know that.
Thank you for your enthusiasm, and we will take you up on that and fight on our behalf with regards to the pink tax. I think something I think that you worked on a couple years ago in regards to sexual harassment and implementing some regulations within Congress. There's another question from a citizen. She thanks you for your incredible leaderships. Can you share a little bit more about your work to address sexual assault in the military and support for women breaking glass ceilings while serving on behalf of our country, but subjected to harassment?
A really good question. This is a great example of how you have a much bigger megaphone that you give yourself credit for. I started working on the issue of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the military in 2011. And I got nowhere fast, but I started telling the stories of these victims, both men and women, on the House floor. And then I changed committees and joined the Armed Services Committee so that I would be in a position to have a larger voice there. and then started introducing amendments to our National Defense Authorization Act. And the first couple of years when I introduced the legislation to take these cases out of the chain of command, because the chain of command oftentimes is where the perpetrator is, or they don't want to do anything about it because it's going to impact their ability to be promoted. I got nowhere. I got nowhere even with my Democratic colleagues. That's all changed. And I give credit to the media recognizing that this was an issue and just continuing to pound away at it. So we've gotten many amendments into the military code, Uniform Code of Military Justice. Before, the victim was subject to hours and hours and hours of cross-examination by the perpetrator's attorney, even before it went to court-martial. So there was one case where there was 3 days and over, 21 to 30 hours of cross-examination of the victim. And the kinds of questions that we have thrown out in civilian society long ago, talking about your history of sexual activity. So we changed that law. We also changed the law that allowed, even after someone was convicted of sexual assault, the convening authority, the higher authority, could overturn the court-martial decision because that particular service member was a good soldier or a good airman. Preposterous, really. But it took drawing a red circle around those cases and drawing attention to them, and then we were able to change the law. So we've made some progress. There's still an alarming number of cases. We've thrown a lot of money at this over the last 10 years, close to $1 billion without much change. The one new proposal that I got into with the defense bill this year was taking these cases out of the chain of command in the military academies, because there's a huge problem there. The best and the brightest that we appoint, and the female cadets say 50% of them are sexually harassed and any number are sexually assaulted. So we're trying to now use that as a model. So it's a pilot project, taking these cases out of the chain of command and having an independent prosecutor review them and determine whether or not to take them to a court-martial.
Thank you so much for that. And there's hope when you're not the only person working on this. So we appreciate your efforts. There is a question.
Do we have time for one more, Tanya?
Yeah, one more
Okay.
question from Melissa Lucan. And this is something that we've been talking about the last couple of days, which is encouraging and supporting women to run for office and run for Congress. An example, looking at our city councils, there are no salaries for those positions. And sometimes that could be a big economic hurdle for women trying to be able to run for office. But just looking at Congress, what can we do to successfully support women to run for Congress and continue to run even if they fail to get elected?
So you're looking at a 3-time loser. I lost for student body president in high school. I lost the first time I ran for Congress, and I lost when I ran for lieutenant governor of California. What you have to do is just keep moving forward. And you may have to run more than once for an office. So be it, do it. You build up your name ID. In every case when I've lost, I've actually learned so much more, and actually it's prepared me to run subsequently. So I'd say that you just have to do it. Don't wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder. That's not how it happens. And if you run, and even if you lose, you have a new stature in that community. And if you come to a city council meeting after you've lost and you make a request, I guarantee you it's going to be taken much more seriously. And you will build your resume in that process. But you'd be surprised how many first-time candidates get elected, not just for city council, but for Congress. Lots of people are getting elected to Congress having never run for office before. Look at AOC. She was a bartender and was able to get elected and beat someone who was like fourth in leadership in the House of Representatives. So these aren't one-offs anymore. These are happening. And there's a whole new generation of young people that are saying, you know, it's time for us, and it is time for you.
Congresswoman
Thank you.
Speier, thank you so much for joining our RISE conference today. You've made, as usual, an indelible impression and great answers to all the questions. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carol. It's been great being with you. Let me just close with my one of my favorite quotations. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And the second one is, you should do something every day that scares you. So run.
And before we go, I want to do a hats off to the Commission on the Status of Women and their staff person, Tanya Beat, for putting this terrific conference together, all virtual, all online. And I think it was a huge success. And commissioners, thank you so much for your work.